The gravy boat was halfway down the table when my grandfather set his fork down, looked directly at me, and said, "Blythe, sweetheart, how has the rental income been on Maple Street?" Everything stopped. My mother's hand, reaching for her wine glass, went absolutely rigid. My father stopped mid-sentence. Even my brother, who had been talking nonstop since we sat down, went quiet. I looked at my grandfather. He was 76, broad-shouldered, with the kind of white hair that made him look like a retired senator. His eyes were steady, patient, and I realized in that exact moment that he already knew the answer. He wasn't asking out of curiosity. He was asking because he wanted everyone at this table to hear it. "What property?" I said. My mother's wine glass hit the table with a sharp click. But before I get to what happened next, before I explain why that question cracked my family apart like a fault line on Thanksgiving Day, you have to understand where I came from. You have to understand who I was in that family and who I wasn't. My name is Blythe. I'm 29 years old. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a 4-bedroom house in a neighborhood where everyone kept their lawns perfect and their family problems hidden behind matching holiday wreaths. We were good at appearances. That was the one thing my family genuinely excelled at. My dad worked in construction contracting. My mom had her real estate license and handled listings on the side when she wasn't running the household. My older brother was the kind of person who walked into a room and the room rearranged itself around him. Charming, funny, loud in all the right ways. My younger sister was beautiful. Not just pretty, genuinely stop-traffic beautiful. She did cheerleading, then dance, then modeling for local boutiques. My parents treated her like a living trophy they carried everywhere. And then there was me. I was the one who remembered to bring an umbrella. I was the one who got straight B's when my brother got C's, and my parents said, "Well, at least he's social." I liked to read legal thrillers. I wanted to be a lawyer someday. I was quiet and methodical, and compared to the two personalities flanking me, almost completely invisible. I don't say this to sound bitter. I say it because it matters. It matters for what came later. My grandfather, my mom's dad, was different from the rest of them. He'd built a small real estate portfolio in the 1980s and 90s, buying up modest rental properties across Charlotte before the city exploded in value. He wasn't wealthy in a flashy way. He drove a 12-year-old Buick. He clipped coupons. But he was financially comfortable in a way the rest of my family only pretended to be. And he saw me. That sounds small, but it wasn't. Every Sunday growing up, my parents would take us to his house for dinner. My brother would hold court at the table telling stories. My sister would show off whatever she'd won that week. And Grandpa would look over at me, sitting quietly with whatever book I'd brought, and say, "Blythe, tell me what you're reading." Not dismissively, not to humor me. He'd actually lean in and listen while I explained the plot. He'd ask follow-up questions. When I was 16 and said I wanted to start as a paralegal and work my way toward law school, he didn't change the subject or look vaguely disappointed the way my parents did. He said, "That's a smart path. Build the foundation first." One afternoon when I was 21, he called me to sit with him on his back porch. Just the two of us. He poured himself sweet tea, handed me a glass, and said, "I've been thinking about your future." I laughed a little. "I'm not going anywhere yet, Grandpa." He didn't smile. He was serious in the way that meant pay attention. "I bought a rental property on Maple Street a few years ago. Small house, good tenants, steady income. I've put it in your name. It's in a trust through my attorney's office, Ed Calloway, downtown. You'll get the details in writing." I stared at him. "You what?" "It's yours. Not your parents', not mine anymore. Yours." He looked at me evenly. "Your mom doesn't always manage money the way she should, and your dad follows her lead on everything. I want you to have something solid that nobody can spend." "Grandpa, I can't." "You can," he said firmly. "And you will. Mr. Calloway has all the paperwork. When you're ready to deal with it yourself, you call him." I thanked him. I hugged him. I went home that night feeling like something had shifted, like the ground under me was a little more stable than it had been that morning. Then life moved forward. I graduated. I got a job at Harmon & Steele, a small civil litigation firm in uptown Charlotte. I got an apartment. I got busy. I told myself I'd call Mr. Calloway when things settled down. I assumed the property was just sitting there, safe, handled the way Grandpa said it was. I was 27 years old when something happened at work that stopped me cold. I was processing a stack of deed transfer filings that a client had sent over for review. Routine work: check the names, check the legal descriptions, verify the notary stamps. I'd done it 100 times. I was on my third cup of coffee, barely paying attention, when I turned to a new page and saw the address. 314 Maple Street. My hands stopped moving. I read it again. The grantor's name was mine, Blythe Ann Kavanaugh. The grantee was an LLC I didn't recognize. The transfer date was 14 months ago. The sale price was listed at $268,000. I sat very still for about 30 seconds. Then I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and stood over the sink until my breathing steadied. I was a paralegal. I knew exactly what a deed transfer meant, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had never signed anything. I had never sold a house. I hadn't even known I owned one, not in any concrete way I'd ever followed up on. I went back to my desk. I pulled the filing out of the stack and photographed every page with my phone. The signature on the transfer document had my name, but it wasn't my signature. The loop on the B was wrong. The Y dropped too far below the line. It looked like someone had practiced it 3 or 4 times and gone with the closest attempt. I looked at the notary stamp. The commission number meant I could look the notary up through the state licensing database. I looked them up that night. The notary's address was a UPS store in Cornelius, a town 20 minutes north of my parents' house. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I called Mr. Calloway's office. I half expected them to tell me he'd retired or the firm had closed. It had been 8 years. A woman answered. I explained who I was. She put me on hold for 2 minutes. Miss Kavanaugh, Mr. Calloway said when he came on the line. He sounded older but alert. I've been waiting for you to call. Something in my chest went cold and then immediately started burning. Sir, I need to ask you about a property on Maple Street. Yes. A pause. Your grandfather established the trust when you were 21. The property was formally transferred to you at that time. We sent the original deed and trust documents to your parents' address, at your grandfather's request, to be forwarded to you. Another pause. I take it you never received them. No, I said, I didn't. And I assume you're calling because something has happened with the property. It was sold, I said, 14 months ago, $268,000. I didn't sell it. I didn't sign anything. The line went quiet for a long moment. When Mr. Calloway spoke again, his voice was very careful. Mrs. Kavanaugh, I need you to come to my office. Bring whatever you have. And I would strongly advise against discussing this with your family until after we've met. I met with him 2 days later. He laid out the original trust documents, the deed, the full chain of title. The property had generated roughly $1,400 a month in rent for 7 years before the sale. I did the math on my notepad right there at his desk. That was close to $118,000 in rental income. Add the sale price. Over $235,000 in total. He didn't say it outright, but I understood what the records were showing me. The rental checks had gone somewhere. The sale proceeds had gone somewhere, and I hadn't seen a single cent. I drove home and sat in my car in the parking garage under my apartment building for 40 minutes. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I was running through it methodically, the way I'd learned to do at work. Evidence, timeline, motive. The documents had been intercepted at my parents' house. They'd known about the property from the beginning. Grandpa had told my mother when he set it up. For 7 years, someone had been collecting rent on a house that belonged to me. And when the Charlotte market peaked and the timing was right, someone had walked into a UPS store in Cornelius, found a notary willing to stamp a forged signature, and sold my house. I thought about the years I'd spent carefully tracking every dollar. The year I ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch 4 days a week, so I could make my car insurance payment on time. The way my mother called me every surf to say she wished she could get me something nicer for Christmas. But things were tight. Things were tight, while someone was depositing $1,400 of my money every single month. I thought about something that happened 2 years before. I'd stopped by my parents' house to drop off my dad's birthday cake. My sister was there with her fiancé. Over dinner, my parents announced they were giving the couple a check to cover their wedding venue. $35,000. My dad patted my sister's hand and said, "We want your day to be special." My sister cried, my mother beamed, my brother raised his glass. I remembered thinking, where did that kind of money come from? My dad's contracting business had been slow for 2 years. Mom's listings were inconsistent. I'd assumed they'd saved it somehow. I hadn't asked. Now I knew. I needed one more piece before I was ready to move. I needed to hear them dismiss me the way they always had, to confirm that their confidence in my silence was still intact. I called my mother that week and mentioned, very casually, that I'd been thinking about getting into real estate investment someday. Maybe a small rental property, I said. Start simple. She laughed. Oh, Blythe, that's so complicated. The paperwork alone. You'd hate it. A pause. Besides, you're not really the type to manage that kind of thing. Not the type. I thanked her, said goodbye, and hung up. I called my grandfather that same evening. I told him I needed to walk him through something serious, and I needed him to hear me out completely before he said anything. He listened without interrupting. I could hear his breathing change as I moved through it, the deed transfer I'd found at work, Mr. Calloway's records, the rental income, the forged signature, the notary in Cornelius. By the time I finished, the silence on his end had a weight to it I could feel through the phone. They took it, he said finally. His voice was flat in a way I'd never heard from him. My own daughter. I want to do this a specific way, I said. I don't want to call anyone tonight. I want to wait until Thanksgiving. I want them to have to look at you when the truth comes out, in front of everyone. A long pause. Why wait? Because they have spent my whole life acting like I don't matter, I said. I want the moment when they understand I've known. I want that to happen in front of my brother and my sister. I want everyone at that table to see exactly who they are. He was quiet for a moment, then slowly, All right, Blythe, we do it your way. We settled on a plan. Grandpa would ask one question, something that sounded conversational, something that would only explode if my parents had done exactly what I knew they'd done. The week before Thanksgiving, I organized everything into a folder. Mr. Calloway's certified copies of the original trust and deed, the forged transfer document I'd photographed at work, 7 years of rental income reconstructed through public property tax filings, a printout of the LLC's current short-term rental listing on Maple Street, pulling $2,000 a month for its new owners. I also hired a real estate fraud attorney. Her name was Ms. Briggs, and she was the kind of professional who made opposing counsel sit up straighter. She reviewed every document, confirmed the forged notarization was a felony under North Carolina law, and told me I had a strong civil case for the full property value, plus rental income, plus interest. She said to call her the Monday after the holiday. Thanksgiving morning arrived gray and cold. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, I sat in the car for a minute with the heat running, new landscaping out front. A second vehicle I didn't recognize, probably leased. The entrance had been repainted since I'd last been there. Fresh and clean and expensive looking. I picked up the folder from the passenger seat. Inside, the house smelled like roasting turkey and sage stuffing and the expensive candle my mother burned on every holiday. My sister was already there with her husband, showing photos on her phone. My brother was in the kitchen narrating his own snack choices to no one in particular. My mother came in from the dining room in a cream-colored blouse, arms open. Blythe, you made it. She hugged me. I let her. What's that? She nodded at the folder. Work stuff, I said. I need to look something over before dinner. She frowned slightly. Tonight's not really. I know, Mom. I'll set it aside before we eat. Grandpa was in the armchair by the window in the den, not watching the game on the television across the room. Just sitting. When he saw me, his face did something complicated. Relief and grief arriving at the same time. I sat across from him. Neither of us spoke for a moment. You holding up? I asked quietly. No, he said, but I will be. His eyes moved to the folder. You have everything? Everything. He nodded once. His jaw was set. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him, and I understood it wasn't age. It was the particular exhaustion of realizing someone you loved had been capable of something like this all along. Ready when you are, he said. Dinner was called. I carried the folder to the table and set it beside my plate. My mother glanced at it again and said nothing. My dad made a toast. He talked about gratitude and family and blessings. He talked about how proud he was of all 3 of us kids. He used the word family 4 times in 45 seconds. I counted. The first 20 minutes of dinner were ordinary. My brother told a story. My sister and her husband talked about their apartment renovation. My mother kept everything moving. kept the dishes circulating, kept her eyes off the folder sitting next to my plate. Then my grandfather set down his fork. He looked around the table, my brother, my sister, my parents, then me. He gave me the smallest nod. Blythe. His voice was easy, conversational. Sweetheart, how has the rental income been? On Maple Street? Total silence. My mother's hand stopped where it was. My father turned a color I'd never seen a person turn. A grayish underwater color, like something draining from the inside out. My brother looked between them, confused. What's on Maple Street? Grandpa kept his eyes on my parents, patient, waiting. I'm not sure what you're referring to, my father said. Too controlled, a half-second too late. The rental property, Grandpa said. The one I put in Blythe's name 8 years ago. Single-family home. About $1,400 a month. He tilted his head. Blythe, has the income been coming through all right? I looked at my father, then my mother. Then I said, what house, Grandpa? My mother made a sound, a short, swallowed syllable. Something started and pulled back. The property on Maple Street, Grandpa said, in the same level tone. That I purchased for Blythe, that I placed in a trust in her name. That my attorney has the original documentation on. The same documentation your office was copied on when the trust was established. He paused. Because I made sure of it. My father's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I opened the folder. The sound of paper in the silence was very loud. I slid the first document across to my brother. That's the original trust deed, I said. My name, Mr. Calloway's seal, 8 years ago. My brother picked it up and read it. His expression moved from confusion to something heavier. I slid the second document. That's the deed transfer, 14 months ago to an LLC, $268,000. My sister's husband reached over and read it. Is that your signature? It looks like mine, I said, but I never signed it. I had never seen that document until it crossed my desk at work 2 months ago. My sister looked at our mother. Mom, what is this? My mother's composure had been holding. Now it showed its first crack. Her voice came out higher than usual. Thanksgiving is not the place for. When is the place? Grandpa asked. Still quiet. Still worse than loud. How long would the right time have taken? Another 8 years of collecting rent on a house that belongs to your daughter. We were managing it for her, my father said. The words tumbled out. She was young. She wasn't in a position to deal with it. We were holding it until she was ready. You sold it, I said, without telling me, without asking me. My signature was forged in front of a notary at a strip mall in Cornelius. I looked at him steadily. I'm a paralegal, Dad. I know what every one of those documents means. I know what the notary's commission number means. And I know that what you did to me is a felony in this state. The word sat on the table like something dropped from a height. My brother set down the deed. He looked at my father with an expression I'd never seen on his face, something close to genuine horror. Did you actually forge her name? It wasn't like that, my mother said. Her voice broke. Tears came fast, the kind that arrive early and redirect attention. We were in a difficult position. Your father's cash flow we needed. We planned to pay it back. Pay it back with what? I said. There's no repayment plan. There's no account in my name. The sale proceeds went into your joint checking account and they're gone. I've been through the property tax records. 7 years of rental income. You used it to pay for my sister's wedding venue. You paid off the truck. You did the kitchen 2 years ago. I looked at my sister. $35,000 for your venue, from a house that was mine. My sister went very still. You funded this family, I said, with my money, for 7 years. And when the market peaked, you sold the whole thing. Meanwhile, I was stretching a paralegal salary across student loans and telling myself to be patient. I heard my own voice stay steady. I'd practiced this moment, but I hadn't expected how clean it would feel to finally say it out loud. You didn't forget about me. You counted on me. No one at the table said anything. Grandpa reached into his jacket pocket and took out his phone. My mother saw it and something shifted in her face. Dad, please. I am calling Ed Calloway, he said. And then I am calling the real estate fraud attorney I retained last week. He looked at my mother, and his face held something I will never forget. Not anger exactly, but a finished, irrevocable grief, the expression of someone who has closed a door they know will not open again. I sent that deed to your house to be passed along to your daughter. You held it for 8 years. You collected her income. You forged her name. You are a thief, and so is your husband. My mother began to cry in earnest. My father stared at the tablecloth. My brother stood up slowly. He looked at my parents, then at me. I could see him going back through years of assumptions and recalculating every one of them. "The wedding venue," he said. "You said you helped cover part of it too, the rehearsal dinner." My father didn't answer. My brother's voice went flat. "Was that her money?" Silence. He walked out of the dining room. I heard the front door. My sister sat rigidly beside her husband, staring at nothing. She didn't look at me. I didn't expect her to. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. I picked up the folder. I pushed back my chair. "My attorney will be filing civil claims Monday morning," I said. "If you want to discuss restitution before that, have your attorney contact Ms. Briggs. Her card is in there." I nodded toward the documents on the table. Then I looked at my grandfather. "Ready?" He stood without a word. He laid his napkin on the table. He walked around to my side and took my arm, and we walked out of that dining room together. Past the food still sitting untouched. Past the good china. Past the candle burning on the sideboard, and out the front door into the cold. I exhaled. It felt like I'd been holding that breath for 8 years. Ms. Briggs was exactly what I'd needed. The civil suit named both my parents. The forged notarization triggered a separate state investigation, and the notary's commission was revoked inside of 2 months. My parents didn't fight the suit. The paper trail was too clean and they knew it. They settled. Full restitution. The sale price plus 7 years of rental income plus interest. When I saw the final number on paper, I had to read it twice. Their house went on the market in February. Charlotte's market moves fast. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment off the interstate. My mother called me twice from numbers I didn't recognize. I let both go to voicemail. The messages were about forgiveness and family, and how she hoped I understood she'd never meant to hurt me. I saved them both. I didn't call back. My brother came to my apartment 3 weeks after Thanksgiving with coffee and without excuses. He said, "I was too comfortable. I didn't ask the right questions about any of it." We talked for 2 hours. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had as adults. My sister texted me months later. She said she hoped we could move forward someday. I wrote back that I was open to it. I didn't apologize for anything. There was nothing to apologize for. With the settlement, I put 20% down on a house in Noda, a neighborhood I'd wanted to live in for years, close to the Greenway, good light in the mornings. I painted the front door the same shade of blue as the shutters on Maple Street. It felt like the right thing to do. I enrolled in night school. Law school applications are due in the fall. I see Grandpa most Sundays. We sit on his back porch when the weather allows, the same porch where he told me 8 years ago that I was taken care of. I used to feel a complicated sadness about that, about how close it came to going the other way entirely. One afternoon in the spring, he was quiet for a while watching the yard. Then he said, "I should have done it differently. Made sure the deed went to you directly. That was my failure." "You were trying to keep the peace," I said. "You thought they were better than they were." He shook his head slowly. "I knew your mother had her weaknesses. I chose to hope they didn't extend that far." He looked over at me. "But you handled it right. You didn't blow up. You built your case. You waited." "I learned it from legal thrillers," I said. He laughed. A real one, the kind that pushes back against everything heavy. I drove home that evening with the windows down, even though it was barely 60 degrees. The city was green and loud and full of people who had never heard of Maple Street or a forged signature or a Thanksgiving table that shattered every clean surface my parents had spent a lifetime polishing. I used to think being invisible was just what I was. The quiet one, the responsible one, the one nobody worried about because she never demanded to be worried about. Turns out that made them careless. And careless people always leave a paper trail. My name is Blythe. I own my home in my name alone with a blue front door. I'm going to be a lawyer, and I am nobody's afterthought anymore.